Hello, I'm Manny Vidal, and today I will be informing you on the little big history of economic recessions. First, let's start off with what an economic recession is, for those of you who don't know. So, you could look at it this way. An economic recession, it's a decline in a country's economic growth or current economic standing. And you could see this happen from multiple reasons. It could be from the stock market crashing, could trigger it. It could be because of a war that a country is going in. It could be because of a political issue. It could be basically because anything could trigger it. Because one little thing can trigger, it's like a domino effect. Okay, so now that you know, now we could go into economic recession. So we're going to start back in the day, way back with first human life. So we got to look here because this is really the first time that we saw small microeconomies formed. Now, you could say that it's not really an economy, they didn't have a massive amount of people, but in these hunter-gatherer tribes, there was enough people where there was some sort of trading, most likely. We weren't there to see, but we could kind of get a hint from seeing some of the tools that were made back in those times, some of the items that were collected, and we could kind of put together that there had to be some sort of trade. So you could look at this as the first sort of mini microeconomies. Now, they didn't really do serious heavy trade that could affect numerous people. So a recession back then probably would have looked like somebody going and saying, I don't have enough berries to trade with you, so I can't get the shovel. And then they don't have the shovel to go and cut down more berry trees. So that could be looked at as a little economic recession back in the early human era. Now we move on, and now we're going to look at more of the boom of economies, like larger more global economies, and that would be with agriculture. When agriculture began, it allowed for individuals to really rise to power, and they created these massive city-states. And this is where you saw the first decent amount of trading going on. Now you could say back then, it still was trading between goods. So it was kind of iffy to understand how an economic recession could work. But again, it's the same exact thing. It could be based on grain. It could be based on somebody holding siege against another city-state. All these things fuel into an economic recession. So a good example would be, say, Mesopotamia. They're going, agricultural powerhouse. And they could go and say, oh, we were supposed to get this grain or this wheat from another smaller section of Mesopotamia. And as a whole, Mesopotamia cannot get the grain. That grain they directly relied on to feed a group of people who are scholars, who come up with laws and ideas. So you could look at that, and then the laws and ideas are a mess. And it's a slow, I guess you could say, it's the dominoes. They slowly fall, but eventually they're all going to fall, and you have to pick up the pieces. So now moving on from agriculture, now we can look at more advanced economic recessions. So you got to imagine, in that time period, people had to find a way to value things other than their individual value. So by that I mean, there had to be a way that you could purchase something without having to trade it for another good. And currencies came along. Money, the US dollar, what everyone knows and loves. You love having the US dollar in your pocket. So you look at that, and value of the dollar was also based on how strong economies were in certain countries. So the bigger producing countries, their dollar or their currency was worth more. So you could look at the Industrial Revolution. At the time, with China being a powerhouse in that leading into it, they would have had a significantly stronger currency. And then when England got into the game and saw the opportunity for automation, then their currency would have gone up because they started doing more and more trade through currency. So with all these countries' value of their currency increasing, eventually something's going to happen. And you could look at the more modern interpretation of this, which is a recent event that we were all directly affected by, and that's the 2008 market crash. Now, this is definitely in the modern age. This is past the Industrial Revolution, but I love this example because it's a great example of what an economic recession does and how it can happen. And let's start off with the beginning. So first, the main thing everyone talks about is The Big Short, the movie, where how this guy leveraged all the banks and said the housing market's going to collapse, basically betting against America. That's what he did. Now, although you might say, oh, that's crazy, he was brilliant because he knew the banks were over leveraging and they were giving out loans that the bank couldn't really pay. And so let me explain this in more detail. So the banks, what they essentially did was the money they were holding, they loaned out to people. But instead of the bank loaning out, if you get a loan, let's say, you get a loan for $100,000. The bank has $200,000. They're going to loan you out $100,000 and keep the extra $100,000 just in case you can't pay it back because they need to cover their side. But what the bank started doing, which was wrong, is they started loaning out that extra $100,000 to people to try to make more money. So, eventually, people couldn't pay their mortgages. And so, with the mortgages going and declining and people not able to pay them, the banks were like, where's our money? We don't have money to pay off our losses in the market or pay off the other mortgage losses. So they went to the credit card company and said, we need you to loan us more money. We need you to loan us more money. We have no money. We have no money. And what's the point of the bank? It's to hold money. So then the credit card companies go, too bad. We're not going to loan you the money. It's too risky. And then they start pulling from people's cards. They start saying, here you go. You can't go buy stuff. You're looked as a high-risk client, and we need to hold the money because the banks are holding a lot of our money, and now we need to hold the money just in case so we don't go under. So there you go, the domino effect. It starts with the banks over-loaning, then you go to the credit card companies, and then it directs the people. So that is, in my opinion, the greatest example of an economic recession. Now, looking back, I haven't stated it before, but I'll state it now. But the theme with these, I guess you could say, recessions, is they seem to be always driven by like some sort of greed or an underregulation of a new sector. And so it seems like whenever there's a new sector, there's always this big boom around it. And it's because people get hype or get excited. But the issue is when they don't regulate it, some stuff gets too high, and then the market will crash. Because the market is very directly related to economic recessions. And thus, when the market crashes, then governments go and look at it, and they regulate, and that will fix it. But then the other theme is sometimes it's greed. It's just general greed. People are greedy at heart. They want more money. They want to be wealthy. So they will take any opportunity they can get. You could look back at trading in the first humans, as I stated first. They literally would go, you could go and say, you could look at trading the first humans, as I stated in my first argument, that when they would trade, they could have many little economic recessions. And it could be because somebody wants as many berries as possible. And so they over-leverage their berries, or their tools. Let's look at it this way. They over-leverage their tools they have, and they say, here, I'll give you all my tools, but you got to give me all your berries. And then what happens is, they give all their tools, the guy's berries all rot, and they have nothing. It's simple greed. That's what a lot of these economic recessions, down moments in economic history, they all are very focused heavily on human greed. And with that, I would like to conclude my little informative session on the little big history of economic recessions. And I hope you guys all enjoyed.